I did not hit that goal for 2 months. 2 months. Every week, did I hit it? No. And I was tracking it. Did I hit it? No. 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 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks, 7 weeks. Literally took 8 weeks for me to hit the goal. That's how it goes. Okay? You get yourself calm. You see clearly. You decide what's that thing you need to work on, and you put a plan together. Changing behaviors is real. It's a challenging thing to do, but you can do it. We all can do it. Undoubtedly, our minds are having a strong influence on our physiology. So going to need to function off of feeding your mind by updating your stories with good stories. Good stories, not bad stories. Treat your mind like your body. Take care of it. And put a simple plan together and then start executing on the plan as best you can. And don't change it until you got it. All right. Here we go, y'all. Episode number 10 coming at you. Hey, apparently getting 10 is a little bit of a milestone. One of the platforms that I use or need to use, or however you want to look at it. Well, send me an email telling me I'm awesome. So, anyways, episode 10, mind and body, the psychophysical. Did I spell that wrong? I certainly did. You know, psychophysical is a technical term, and I'll try and use it as minimally as possible. We will stick with mind-body whenever possible, but I do like technical terms because they're a better description. You know, they are a better description, generally speaking. Goal of this episode is to begin to understand the mind-body connection, how each can affect each other, how each can affect the other, and why change can be difficult. Yeah, when we're done with this, it's going to, undoubtedly, you're going to start to understand, oh, this is why when I want to do something, it doesn't always happen, right? That's going to become abundantly clear as we get into today's podcast. So that is the main goal, is to help you understand why that happens and how it's happening. Outline of topics. Took me a long time to get this one organized. As always, I think I can throw down 3 things and be good to go. And then, you know, stuff just starts popping into my head. And next thing you know, there's too much and I have to break it up and turn it into another podcast. And that is a good thing, I suppose. So, outline of topics. I shall read them. Updates. Before we get started. The elephant and the rider. The mind evolved from the body. Think about that. The struggle is real. It's a two-way street. And then some final thoughts. So updates, we're going to do the typical updates. Before we get started, I need to give a little preface. I need to I got to say some things before we get into this. The Elephant and the Rider is going to be a story. I got it from a book. I'm going to talk about that. It really is when I started to encapsulate this idea. The mind evolved from the body. We're going to get into some history and kind of explain that. The struggle is real because it is changing. Behaviors is real. It's a challenging thing to do, but you can do it. We all can do it. In fact, that's what we evolved from. If you look at our history, humans have been the struggle is trying to change physiology. It's trying to get physiology to go in a specific directions, and we've created we've created one major tool. I won't get into that today, but I've got a couple things we'll get into in the next episode. It's a two-way street, so we'll talk about how it goes up and down, and then some final thoughts. All right. Some quick updates. Lions took care of the Bears, barely, on Thanksgiving Day. How annoying was that, huh, if you watched? Anyways, I won't labor on that. Also, Michigan beat Ohio State. I don't know if there's any Ohio State fans out there. Weather. Don't turn it off if you are, and I said that, okay? It's just a sport, for crying out loud. Weather. Clouds. So this is what you're going to hear when I give weather updates of what's going on up here in Michigan. Is it's cloudy, and it's 30s now. 30s and 40s sometimes. Subscriber update, email 62. I don't know if that's going to move again until we start putting some focus on it. YouTube went from 48 to 52. Consistent growth in the YouTube. Thank you to everybody who subscribed to YouTube. We appreciate you. Spotify moved up 1 and took the lead over Apple. So we are at 18 for Spotify and 17 for Apple. Thank you to the new Spotify subscriber. Reminder, please submit your questions to dennis@dennisfenrich.com or reply to the email if you are already subscribed. That's it for the updates. All right, let's get into this. Actually, hold up. Hold up. Before we get into this, we're going to preface this. We're going to put a little, I forgot to update this. What is the name of this one? There was so many last minute changes on this. Where's my outline of topics here? Before we get started, it was be forewarned. I thought that was a little ominous. So I changed it to before we get started. It's a lot better. Before we get started, let me cover some things here really quick, man. I'll read this and I'll talk. If we are talking about the mind body, the psychophysical, we will inevitably dip into the spiritual metaphysical to some degree. It's just almost unavoidable because when you talk about the way I talk about this, I'm going to talk about it from a evolutionary historical perspective. I'm going to try to avoid the spiritual, the metaphysical as much as possible, but it inevitably kind of creeps, that's the wrong word, makes its way in there because it's, oh my God, see, it's already happening. Because it's a reality of the world that we live in, whether you believe in a God or not. We're going to talk about the psychophysical, or we end up talking about the metaphysical. In the spiritual. It comes up, it's part of our culture, it's part of our society. I will tell you super quick my beliefs, but when I go through this today and when I think about the mind-body connection, I'm always trying to understand it from a evolutionary, historical perspective. You know, what do we know? What do we have observed? You know, I don't think that lack of evidence doesn't disprove a God, right? Just because we don't have evidence of a God doesn't mean there is not one. And I guess that's what I'll say about that. Although you could totally argue there's evidence everywhere. You totally could. But I do believe in a guiding force. I do believe that there is direction. I might point that out a couple times. I most likely will. And that always, if there is direction, it always brings into question, well, how is there? And to me, it does appear to be, after looking at this thing for quite a bit of time, that there is a direction that we are going, and there appears to be a force that is putting us in that direction. Why would we have direction otherwise? I don't know. So those are my beliefs. But again, I will do my best to stay to the evolutionary, historical viewpoint as much as possible and only dip into the physical, metaphysical, the metaphysical and the spiritual when and if needed. Okay, so that is before we get started, or be forewarned, however you want to look at it, I suppose. Okay. So this is how I started to conceptualize this mind-body connection, the psychophysical. I read a book. It's a good book, really good book. I think I read it twice. It's called The Happiness Hypothesis. It's by a guy named Jonathan Haidt, H-A-I-D-T, Happiness Hypothesis, Jonathan Haidt. I'm not sure how to say his last name, but it is spelled H-A-I-D-T. And in this book, he tells a story, and here's the story. You know, so picture in your mind, picture an elephant with a rider on the back of it. There's obviously a disproportionality to those two things. The elephant is ginormous, and the rider on the back is very small. The elephant represents your physiology, and the rider represents your mind, or your mind, what you think about. And the elephant, obviously, if it wants to go do something, it is going to go do that thing, okay? So if it decides it's thirsty, it's more than likely going to go get a drink of water. If it wants to go eat something, it's more than likely going to go eat something. Unless the rider has a very good relationship with this elephant and he's able to guide it and keep it from doing these things, it's going to do what it wants to do. So a new rider, no control. Experienced rider, more control. But ultimately, if a lion came on the scene or some life-threatening situation came upon that elephant, the elephant is going to do what it's going to do, regardless of the rider. So that's the elephant and the rider analogy. And it starts to give you a picture of what's going on with your physiology, the psychophysical, the mind body that we all have to learn to operate in. And it really helps to paint that picture and begin to understand what is going on. Okay. So just keep that in mind or think about that as we're going through this. Okay. So let's talk about the physiology for a little bit, or the overall big picture. So basically you have physics. So you have the universe. Then you have biology, and this biology evolved or came out of the stuff that the universe, our planet, is made out of. And on top of that, consciousness or the mind has appeared or evolved outside on top of that, right? So you have this world, you have this existence, you have life that forms up out of that, and then life over millions of years, which we're going to talk about here in a second, begins to evolve a consciousness or a mind or some sort of capacity to view the universe, basically, to observe and to be conscious of what's going on, right? So you got physics, you got biology, and then you got consciousness. So looking at this from a historical perspective. So 4 billion years ago, life was formed, single cell. So you had single cells. About 1 billion years ago, those cells started to get together. They started to form and turn into multi-cell organisms, and that's where the word organism comes from, is this organized, okay? So you got 4 billion years, life forms. For about 3 billion of those years, it's just basically single-cell stuff going on. Nothing too complex, pretty dang complex and compared to just ordinary matter, but they haven't started to, quote-unquote, work together and begin to form up multi-celled organisms. That happens about 1 billion years ago. So single cells for 3 billion years, then 1 billion years, you get multi-cell. They're screwing around doing their thing. And then about 2 million years ago, you start to get some semblance of what we may call consciousness, okay? And how do we know that? Well, the 4 billion and the billion, I have no idea how we know that. But the consciousness thing, the mind thing, starts to make some sense because we start to see things appearing that did not appear before. You start to see, and I think probably the tools. We start to see tools forming up. I'm pretty sure it's been established that we started to utilize, human beings started to utilize fire about 2 to 2.5 million years ago. Don't ask me how they know that, but it's pretty well established. So you start to see these things that could have only happened in a conscious or somewhat conscious organism, and it was humans, fortunately for us. And that goes on for quite some time. Up until about 10,000 years ago, you start to see the domestication of animals, you start to see agriculture, and you start to see large social structures. And that is a key pivotal point in our history. We started to go from smaller tribes of, I think they estimate, 50 to 150 to large social structures that are being built and established around agriculture and domestication of livestock. And with that, you start to see a flourishing human race, but you also start to see, and humans start to encounter complications with trying to keep such large masses of people all on the same page and not tearing each other apart, essentially. And so here's where the interesting thing comes in, about 4 to 3,000 years ago, you see something crop up. And there's a bunch of stuff before that, but this is kind of like an interesting point that always stands out to me. You see the 10 Commandments, and that's what you see. You see, and to me, I interpret that as, hey, humans have been trying to figure things out, right? About 10,000 years ago, we started forming up large social structures, and these are getting bigger and bigger. And how do we keep those people in those social structures working together and not, doing things they shouldn't be doing? And you start to see these 10 Commandments crop up, and it's basically a list of things of what not to do. I think there's a couple in there that just at the church I go to, they just went through all this, and that's why it's on my mind. But from completely putting the spiritual stuff aside, from the historical perspective, That's about when that came up. And it makes sense that that would come up about that time because these social structures were getting bigger and bigger. And you're going to need some sort of system that helps keep the peace, right? If you don't have peace, you're not going to have a good social structure. You're not going to have people working together and doing the things that they need to do. And then about 500 years ago, we see a major advancement in consciousness, and that is essentially science, okay? So science comes on the scene. Science is essentially the study of the universe, the study of physical matter is how it kind of gets its start. But obviously today it turns into we can study all kinds of things. We can study, how humans behave and what other animals are doing and all this stuff. But science was a way to look at the world, interpret based on comparison what is happening. And it was a different way of thinking that didn't even exist prior to about 500 years ago. There was little inclinations of it, but it took a while for it to reach its full form in what we experience today. Now, interesting thing to point out, the fact that we still need to live and operate together is not changed by the fact that we have a better understanding of the universe, okay? We still have people that need to learn how to live and operate together, and we have this new tool called science where we can look at the world and see scientifically what's going on, and we can say, oh, a single cell started about 4 billion years ago, okay? So prior to science, there had no idea what was going on with that, but now we have this tool. But the main point is they run parallel. Science doesn't disprove the fact that we need to have morals and standards and learn how to work together, okay? Our ancestors were figuring that stuff out long before science came along, okay? That's one point. Main point, though, and we're getting back to our topic, which is the mind-body connection and how to begin to understand how that works and so we can have better control over it, is life was going on for about 4 billion years and consciousness has been going on for about 2 million. So that is, life's got a way stronger head start, right? So it's integration into the physical world is deep. It is intrinsic. It is instinctual. It is doing what it's been doing. Life is doing what it's been doing for 4 billion years. And you came along in 2000 whatever or 19 whatever, and with your consciousness, and you're basically get to ride on all that time of evolution, okay? And then you get to try and change your behavior patterns. Have fun. Or, it's on how you look at it, right? I would definitely go with this view, though. Boom, 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 let's get after it. Okay, so that's the mind, how the mind evolved from the body, right? You got this long process of life forming up. You got consciousness about 2 million years ago, starting to form up out of that. And now this is where you get to operate. And that's why I have a mind-body connection and why somebody's doing a podcast on it. The struggle is real. So let me read a couple things from a book called The Origins and History of Consciousness. Fantastic book. If you want to go deep on this subject of what I just kind of talked about with the history of consciousness and how it formed up, because it actually started about 2 million years ago with the advent of tools and all that stuff. This book goes into that, and it goes into the evolutionary process of the different societies that formed up and what we were thinking about and what we were creating and how we viewed the world. It's a fantastic book. It's called The Origins and History of Consciousness. It is incredibly heavy. It was written in 1950, I think. But anyways, I'm going to read a couple lines from it. Millions of years of ancestral experience are stored up in the instinctive reactions of organic matter. And in the functions of the body, there is incorporated a living knowledge, almost universal in scope, but not accompanied by any sort of consciousness. Again, so this is just kind of reinforcing the idea or the understanding that your body operates without you, right? You don't make your hair grow. You don't make your nails grow. You don't make your digestive system work. You can affect it with how stressed out you are, but you don't really turn it on or off. When you swallow food, it does what it's going to do, regardless of your consciousness. In fact, you're not even paying any attention to it most of the time. You're not involved in the replication of your cells. You're not telling all your cells to regenerate themselves all the time. You are living in this organism that has been here way longer than you, and it knows what it's doing, okay? Add a little more to that. The real source of conflict between the individual and the unconscious lies in the fact that the unconscious represents the will of the species, right? You came along into a human body, and that species was already here for a long, long time, doing what it's doing. Be thankful that you got one. You got to crack at it. So those two lines come from the Origins and the History of Consciousness. This isn't anything new that I'm sharing. This struggle isn't something from today. I don't know what I'm trying to say there. It's not new, right? Our ancestors have been doing this for a long time and we're aware of it. In fact, I'm going to read something from the Bible, Romans 7:15 through 20. Our ancestors recognized the struggle. And this is what was said way back thousands of years ago. I do not understand what I do. For what I want to do, I do not do. But what I hate, I do. And if I do what I do not want to do, I agree that the law is good. As it is no longer I myself who do it, but it is sin living in me. For I know that good itself does not dwell in me, that is, in my sinful nature. For I have the desire to do what is good, but I cannot carry it out. For I do not do the good that I want to do, but the evil that I do not want to do. This I keep on doing. Now, if I do what I do not want to do, it is no longer I who do it, but it's the sin living inside of me. You got to understand that sin is actually a word that meant and it's got a little different meaning today. But back then, when they were using that word, sin meant miss the target, right? So you can hear this person, I believe it's Paul who wrote that, who's struggling with his physiology. He's struggling to get himself to do the things that he knows he should do in his consciousness, in his mind, but his physiology continues to get him to do the things that he doesn't want to do. And that continues today. Hopefully today, it's not as big of a struggle, but I don't know. 1,000, 2,000 years, I don't think there's going to be a huge difference in how more effective we are. We are going to get more effective, and you can get more effective personally by working on it and focusing on it, but it takes guess what? It takes a conscious effort, okay? So not trying to get spiritual on you, but it just goes to show that what you're dealing with is nothing new. It's been going on for a long time, obviously. I mean, ultimately, I think the whole struggle of humanity is trying to get physiology that we're born into to go do the things that we want it to do, independent of what is happening in the world, right? I think ultimately that's the struggle we're all trying to deal with. Okay. Almost there. It's a two-way street. It's a two-way street. Your brain is affecting your body. Here's a great example. Your brain is affecting your body. We all kind of know that to some degree, but how much so? Got another story. Imagine there's a Hindu and he's enjoying a delicious meal. He's doing his thing. He's out with his family and it's an amazing time. The meal was awesome. And then afterwards, somebody informs him that it was meat, that it was from a cow. Now, it's a strong story, but it's going to make my point. That's going to have a very, very adverse effect on the meal that person just ate, right? If he's a practicing Hindu. Because what he thinks is going to affect his physiology. Everything was fine up until he had learned that piece of information. So undoubtedly, our minds are having a strong influence on our physiology. So it can go top down. Another example, you're sitting on a rocket ship and it's about to take off. You're about to have a massive explosion, a controlled explosion, 100 feet under you that's going to project you up into space. You're physically not doing anything, but your awareness of that situation has got your heart rate pegged. I mean, you're literally going to be at max heart rate in that situation, okay? Unless you've done it 50 times and now your mind has got that turned into no big deal, right? But the first time, no way. I don't care who you are, you're not going to be able to control that. So again, the mind is affecting the physiology undoubtedly. What you think about is going to affect how your body works. The body is affecting your mind. This one's probably less understood, so I'll give you an example as well. Sorry about my voice today. It's a little raspy. Maybe it's getting deeper. So there was a study done. They took two groups of people, And they gave one group of people a glass of sugar water, and they gave other people artificially sweetened water. And neither group knew what was going on. They gave them some water. One had carbs in it. They gave the other one water, and it didn't have carbs in it. They weren't told anything about that. Then each group was showed individually a picture of a hill. The group that was not given the sugar water, so didn't receive energy, perceived the hill to be steeper than it was. The group that was given the carbohydrate, was given the energy, perceived the hill to be lower or less steep. So what does that mean? That means that based on our current physiological state, in this example, how much energy is available is going to tell the organism whether going up that hill, whether doing the work makes sense at this moment in time. If energy level is low, your physiology is going to tell you, don't go up that hill. That's going to take a lot of energy, and there's no reason to go up the hill right now. Now, if there was a big chocolate cake at the top, that would change things. That would be your mind. But your physiology is affecting your belief. And I said this a bunch of times. People who have a hard time going to the gym, I don't know that they're lazy. In fact, I don't think that they are. I think people who have a hard time going to the gym want to go to the gym. But their physiology, I think they're undernutritioned. I think that they're probably not getting in enough nutrients for their body to want to expend that energy. I've experienced this in myself. When I'm on a diet, I don't want to work out. I love working out. I've been working out since I was 15 years old. Don't tell me I don't want to work out up here. I don't want to work out because I'm in a calorie deficit and my body is continually telling me to sit down and do nothing to try and conserve energy, okay? So your physiology is undoubtedly affecting your state of mind. So it is a two-way street, top down, mind to body, and bottom up, body to mind. Both need to be fed. Body needs exercise, nutrition, sleep, rest, connection, etc. In your mind, this one's a little bit less understood. We've talked mostly up until this point on this podcast about the body and what the body needs. But the mind needs some specific things as well. It needs goals. It needs contribution, hashtag contribution / being productive. And it also needs to update its stories. And I'll give an example on these right here. How do you feed your mind? Oh, wait, I got to get my glasses on. Has that showed up yet? No. How do you feed your mind? Goals. So with goals, how do you feed your mind? We need to see ourselves moving towards a goal. We are visually oriented. And I'll give you an idea of just how much so. I went to the Google for this. I had heard it before, but I looked it up and I'm like, oh, good. I remember that right. We are visually dominant organisms. I searched the Google AI. A significant portion of the human brain, estimated to be around 50% of the cortex, brain surface, is dedicated to processing visual information. So 50% of your cortex, that's on the outside of the brain, half of that is dedicated to processing things visually. And you got to keep in mind, now with this consciousness thing, we are processing things outside visually, but you're also processing the pictures that you see in your mind, right? So we have this thing called an imagination, and that is also processed through the cerebral cortex. 50% of that thing being used up just for vision. I point that out because when you set a goal, now you have something you see out in the future. And when you get closer to it, when you see yourself, I want to say like physically and mentally see yourself move towards your goal, you get a nice hit of positive emotion. That is essentially why you feel good. When you have something in mind that you want to get closer towards, you're going to get rewarded for getting closer to it. In an animal is the exact same way. All we're doing is using those same systems. The subconsciousness is kind of getting in there and taking advantage of it, right? So an animal, when it sees itself getting closer to food or to a mate, it's going to get a positive emotional response that continues that behavior in that direction. And all we're doing when we just set a goal and we get closer to it is taking advantage of that system. So goals are going to be important for your mental health. Being productive, i.e. contributing or adding to your community, right? So we're communal animals. We're socially structured, right? And so when we see ourselves contributing to what's going on around us in a positive way, again, there's that word, see it, we're going to get a nice kick of positive emotion. It's going to reward the behavior. If you're not being productive, do you feel good about yourself? No, you do not. You know, when you're sitting there wasting time and you're not doing what you should be doing, guess what? You don't get to feel good. It's just the way we're wired, all right? Man, my voice. And the last one, update or improve our stories, right? So our imagination has created these stories, and they are as real as anything. You know, it's how we operate in the world, right? The story of, I want to be a good person. I want to be a good person because it helps other people. I want to help other people because it's good when people do better, right? These are all stories, right? I go to my job. Maybe I don't feel like going to my job, but I go to my job because it's a place for me to impact other people, right? It's a place where I can do good. And so this is essentially a story, something that I see in my mind consciously and actually subconsciously, that is motivating. Okay, so when you update your stories to something that's more accurate, guess what? You're going to get to feel better. So it's important that you update your stories. And again, I'm going to go to the Bible again, not because this is, again, apart from the spiritual side of it, you can just strictly see the Bible from a historical perspective of what were humans trying to do. We were figuring out how to operate in the world. We were figuring out how to get our consciousness or our physiology to do things that lessened suffering, to improve, to make things better. Okay, so in Matthew 4:4, man shall not live by bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of God. So man shall not live on bread, that's food. So you're not just going to function off of eating and feed your physiology. You're also going to need to function off of feeding your mind by updating your stories with good stories. Good stories, not bad stories. So what are you telling yourself? What are you telling yourself? What's the story you got running around in there? This is all tied into your emotional system. Positive emotion comes from seeing yourself move towards your goals, comes from improving the stories in your mind, comes from seeing yourself contributing to a community, contributing or improving your life. When you see those things happen, you get a positive emotion. No progress/improvement, no positive emotion. Final thoughts. And this goes back to what I said in the previous podcast. Excuse me. We are undoubtedly better at thinking, planning, and making decisions when in a calm, clear state of mind. Therefore, gaining control of our stress-rest continuum, the SRC, or your total stress load, gaining control of this is critical to creating the life that we want. Improving our ability to guide our stress response is the goal. And I say that because now we're starting to get an even better picture of how we can do that, right? We need to make sure we got some goals. Yes, we need to make sure we're taking care of our body. We got to make sure we're getting our sleep. We got to make sure we're getting our exercise. We're making sure we're getting our blood moving, making sure we're getting all those things, right? But we also need to make sure that, hey, we're working towards something, that we're waking up and we're not plagued by purposelessness, that we're working towards something, we're trying to make improvement, and we're going to be able to feel good about things. We're able to contribute in a positive way. What's the story you're telling yourselves? To do this optimally, you will want to affect the body and mind. And I just covered that exercise, breath work, blah, blah, blah for the body and the mind. Even breath work's kind of the bridge between the two. Mind, the stories you tell yourself, the information you let in, and what you think about. All those things are affecting your mind. Treat your mind like your body. Take care of it. You guys are getting hit with a lot of stuff, man. You could really be thinking, oh my God, I gotta work on my sleep. I gotta relax at night. I gotta get my connections going. I haven't mentioned water yet. I gotta get my water intake. Where's my protein at? Now, oh my God, now we got the psychophysical. Hey, man, like what on my phone, what's going in my head? What are these stories I'm thinking about? Listen, okay? That ain't gonna get you nowhere trying to do everything at once. I've mentioned this a handful of times. Pick one thing. Pick the one thing that your consciousness is telling you to work on. Pick that one thing and then put a simple plan together and just start working on it until it becomes part of what you're doing. I've had the habit of reading on and off throughout my life. About 2 or 3 years ago, I don't remember now, I knew I needed to start reading again. I had been totally off track. I wasn't reading. I knew I needed to start again. And I set the goal of reading an hour every day. It was ambitious. I thought 30 minutes would have been more appropriate, but I don't know. Something about me is like, no, it needs to be an hour. I did not hit, it was an average of an hour every day for a week. So it was averaging 7 hours a week. I did not hit that goal for 2 months. 2 months. Every week, did I hit it? No. And I was tracking it. Did I hit it? No. 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 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks, 7 weeks. Literally took 8 weeks for me to hit the goal. That's how it goes, okay? You get yourself calm, you see clearly, you decide what's that thing you need to work on, and you put a plan together. I'll say it again. Get yourself calm, get thinking clearly, figure out what that one thing it is you need to work on, and put a simple plan together, and then start executing on the plan as best you can, and don't change it until you got it. Okay? Just because that first and second week I didn't hit it, I'm getting hit with negative emotion, but I don't care. I'm just going to keep working on it. I'm going to keep working on it. I'm going to keep working on it until it becomes part of what we're doing. And that's how you make change, okay? And then maybe you work on exercise for 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, 2 years before you really got it solidified into your behavior patterns. Great. Good job. Now you got it. Now what's the next thing we're going to work on? Now we're going to layer something else in there. Maybe it's the sleep. Maybe it's the nutrition. But pick one thing at a time and stay focused on it until it becomes ingrained into your biology. It gets ingrained into your habits. It becomes a pattern in your life, and then you layer something else in. I started when I was 15. I've been doing this for a long time. You start where you're at and start doing what you need to do, and you're going to get to where you got to go. I promise you. You can do it. It's our whole history is built on. Next podcast, more depth on what we just talked about. We're going to talk about what is change and some mind techniques. We're going to get some specific techniques, a couple that I like a lot. Help us grow. Like and subscribe. YouTube. YouTube is the leader right now. Actually, subscriptions are the leader at 62, but YouTube is catching up at 54. YouTube would be the fastest way for us to start bringing in some money so I can get better product out, help more people. Submit your questions to Dennis@DennisFenrich.com. I spent 2 weeks without a question. Would love a question from you guys. See where you're at. Hope you enjoyed this. I think we wrapped it up well. It's a little rough in the beginning a little bit, but I think we got through it. If you guys got any questions, let me know, and we will see you in a week. Have a great week, guys. All right, bye.